right, thank you for staying with Daybreak. Let's start that conversation right now. The hashtag is Daybreak at Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya. We'd like to hear from you. Keep your views coming on every single subtopic that we'll talk about. We'll talk about the issues around the appointment of the CAS and the protests that are coming up on Monday, plus the demands the Azimio team has. There are 7 of them. We'll try and find out from them what they suggest. One of them is cost of living. The other one is discrimination in state appointments. The other one is privatization of Kenya. Audit of IBC servers, assembling the new IBC, assault on multi-party democracy, and regime incompetence. We'll find out what they think the solutions are to that. Joining us in studio is Honorable Eddie Okech, Senator for Migori. Asante sana for making time.
Thank you.
Honorable Ruben Kiborek, Member of Parliament for Mogotio, is running a bit late. As soon as he comes in, we'll rope him into the discussion. But Eric Komolo, Advocate of the High Court, is here with us. Asante sana for making time.
Thank you.
Honorable Okech, I'll start with you. Looking at the front pages of the Daily Nation, the Standard, it's all about the new CASs. What comes to your mind when you see the list of the people who've been nominated by the President?
Thank you, Trevor. I think that it is critical that I first of all thank you and thank God for the gift of life, that it is on a Friday and we can be able to discuss matters affecting our country. And I want to thank you for this opportunity, and I also want to thank colleague panelists as we wait for Honorable Kiborek to come. Now, to the question of the titles, the headlines that we are seeing today in all newspapers, actually. The first thing must come to mind is whether this government is serious. And I want to start that conversation with an economic outlook of the country. Recently, I think that just about two and a half weeks ago, I sit in the Budget and Finance and Budget Committee of Senate. And we had an opportunity with the Minister, or rather the Cabinet Secretary for Finance, that is Professor Juguna. And the government presented a BPS, which is basically a budget policy statement that draws the nation's attention into what the Ruto regime is trying to propose as the next budget that we are supposed to go to. And in that next budget, we actually forecast that as a country, we are going to be just slightly over 3 trillion economy. And in their own projections, they say that they are going to be able to collect from Kenyans 2.5 trillion of that budget. Now, there's something critical that the government did present that I want to draw the country's attention to. The government presented that they have a fiscal deficit of 720 billion, 100 million. Now, what that means is that that is money that government has got no capabilities of raising, and government has got no capabilities of looking for it anywhere other than borrowing from different markets. Now, what did the government propose to Parliament, which is now being discussed actually in the National Assembly as well? The government suggested to members of the Senate that out of that deficit, the government wants to borrow 520 billion from domestic market and only borrow about 178 billion, 198.6 billion from external markets. These things have got implications. The reason they have implications is that when you look at our country today, Trevor, we already have a serious tax burden. In fact, by the end of I'm seeing when I work I just entered, so yeah. It's good that you'll get to listen to this because it's in the National Assembly. By the end of 2022, our debt ceiling was about 9.4 trillion, 9.1 trillion. And by the coming of the Ruto regime, we're already at 9.4 trillion. What this means is that the government is becoming too expensive for for anybody to run right now.
Yeah.
Now, if you see the Ruto regime deciding to bloat the executive to the extent that we need to cut physical spending if this economy has to get any stability, and the government chooses to bloat the executive to what we are seeing now, is very unfortunate. And this is unfortunate because, number one, it's just not possible to put so much money into running a government and forget that there is so much money that is needed to be able to go to Mwananchi. If you look at our budget today, Trevor, and I've been having a chance to interrogate the budget of the country, 70% of what constitutes our GDP goes to paying government officials. Only 30% does go to development budget. And the worst thing that we are seeing here is that even despite the fact that the CAS positions have always been contested as illegal positions, the bloating that we are seeing in it, because even Uhuru Kenyatta had only up to, I think, about 26 CAS members. Now, what we are seeing here is a symbol. 29 CAS members, 26, 29 CAS members. This is a simple reward system to people that the Ruto regime has been very keen to buy, to get into the executive and to get to State House, and therefore install a serious dictatorial regime. Because even the qualification of these individuals, if you look at them, it is all face of politicians that the Constitution 2010 had purposed to be able to discourage in the executive. The idea of the new constitution was that you can be able to get even professionals in running business. So apart from just increasing the high cost of running government, we are also having simple politicians being put in places of serious work, and that means that it's going to be the most incompetent government that cannot even be able to solve the problems of Kenyans today. Okay. So this is very unfortunate.
All right.
Yes.
Komolo, what are your thoughts on the list of the CASs that have been proposed by the president?
Thank you for having me, Trevor. I've not met Eddie and Kiborek since they were elected.
Yes.
So let me congratulate them as well.
Thank you.
I particularly admire them because they are fairly youthful members of Parliament and the Senate, and I know it's not easy to get elected at that age in this country. I've also had the opportunity to actually read their backgrounds, which is very admirable. I remember Kiborek had to endure a lot, including taking public transport to Nakuru and having people mobilize resources for him. So there are many things to celebrate in Kenya, despite obvious dark sides. Two, I need to declare a conflict of interest in the CAS list.
Some of your friends have been appointed.
Yes. Some people, not necessarily friends, but some people I know closely.
Okay.
Sudi Wadambusi has been my friend for many years. He was working with the Senate, former Senate Speaker, now Governor of Bungoma. And I just need to congratulate him. And also Governor Kidero comes from my village. We share MCA. But that does not mean we are always aligned politically. So let me just congratulate them alongside others. But I think that's where it ends for me as a lawyer. I've always held the position that the office of CAS is unconstitutional. If you look at job description, including the reference that has been made to Parliament for vetting and all that, you are talking about people are exercising functions of state officers. More or less, people are deputy cabinet secretaries. So in a sense, above principal secretaries who are state officers. So I know that the president has powers under the Constitution in consultation with the Public Service Commission to establish offices in public service. I don't think that extends to state offices. So that's my first point of departure, and that's why I supported Law Society of Kenya very aggressively in challenging the position that was being created, that has now been created.
But the court allowed this?
Yes, but appeal process has not been exhausted. Okay. Remember, even more interesting is that the Public Service Commission defended their position that they had just created 23 positions.
Yeah.
Now we have 50 or so. So that's my first point of departure. I'm not still convinced that we need offices of chief administrative secretaries.
Yeah.
Having said that,
but even the LSK's complaint was that it was created without public participation, not so much that it is an illegal position. It was the process of having
is just one element of creating offices in public service. The bigger point is whether the president's mandate extends to creating equivalent of constitutional offices. Another one that has not been tested, but probably ought to be tested, is what you call Nairobi Water Services Commission or something like that. The Water Service Commission. Yeah. That basically intrudes into the functions of counties and all that and other state agencies. I don't know whether, and particularly because the president gives us the commission powers equivalent to, and privileges equivalent to that of the commissions under Chapter 15. So there are bigger legal issues around these offices.
Okay.
Two, assuming they are there legally, since the appeal process has not been exhausted, the president also has an additional obligation to ensure 2/3 gender rule is met. I can understand the challenge, and I think my friends here agree, that is more difficult when you're talking about elective positions to entrench affirmative action, because this is about one man, one vote. But when it comes to administrative decisions like appointment of people into public positions like the vacancies the president had over CAS, I don't understand why he could not just appoint a third women. At the moment, we are talking about 28. This is an executive or a party that I'm sure Mr. Honorable Kiborek agrees, promised women 50%. I know the function of government is to implement their manifesto. So I'm not sure at what point, I can understand the dynamics of politics in the country, but I'm not sure at what point the president abandoned his promise to women of this country.
Okay.
And finally, I'm worried, and I've indicated that Dr. Kidero and I come from the same area, so I'm not going to the specifics of the individuals appointed, but I'm worried about just blatant disregard of youths in these appointments, whether they're women or men. I'm not familiar with all of them, but the closest to a youth here, at least from the newspaper, seems to me to be Dennis Itumbi, who is not necessarily a youth. And in a parliament where we are increasingly having young people who should be mentored, you know, the only justification I can buy about this CAS position is that it's a point for nurturing young people to get into public service, to be mentored to do the right thing. Now, if you appoint all these people who didn't win elections last time, and not that they should be discriminated against, but if you appoint them in a manner that also seems to be settling political scores, then I think it's total abuse of the privilege that comes with appointing people to such senior positions in government.
All right. Honorable Ruben Kiborek is now joining us, Member of Parliament for Mogoche. Thank you for making time. You just walked in when we were discussing the appointment of the CAS. And what are your preliminary thoughts having seen the list from State House?
Thank you, Trevor. First and foremost, they are competent Kenyans. And looking at them from the face value are people we know. And they have all public offices before, some of them, and they are competent Kenyans. Secondly, I've listened to my brother Eddie saying it is unconstitutional, and we all know that the court made its ruling and said it is constitutional. It given the president the green light to go ahead. It had stopped because the court had injected it. So to me, from where I sit, me and Eddie, we might not have seen Kenyatta government or Moi government, but at least we saw Kibaki government. And if there was a bloated government, it was Kibaki government, where each and every state department was like a ministry. It was 2013. In that government of Kibaki, it delivered more than this one of Uhuru Kenyatta we are looking at here and trying to compare. I would have wished we could have extended here a column of Kenyatta government ministers so that we see how many ministers Kibaki had. He had almost 42 ministers. And Kibaki delivered to the expectation of Kenyans, especially on matters economy. Secondly, we have the plan, which was our manifesto, which Trevor might not be aware, which Eddie might not be aware because he has possibly not read it. In that the plan, we had roles and duties that we need to discharge and to discharge to this country of Kenya. And we think it is good to have these people in position so that we're able to implement our agenda. What they should be judging us based on is our plan, which was the manifesto, which we gave to Kenyans, which we are still sticking to it, working hard to it. So that is what basically should be our point of debate. Are we still sticking to the plan? Are we sticking to the manifesto we promised Kenyans? And it was necessary for us to have extra people to help us discharge this plan, because given that the minister and the CS, they can get a lot of, the PS and the CS can get a lot of pressure from duties, maybe going to addressing conferences. It's better to have some spare tire so that they can start the plan in the best way we know, bottom up. Bottom up means we have to discharge our manifesto from grassroots. There should be someone taking people through somewhere in Turkana on issues water. There should be someone who is in charge leading from the front. So we need these numbers to discharge our plan. And the only problem that Eddie doesn't understand here is that he doesn't understand the plan and he has not read it. But from today, Trevor, I promise to give him one.
But are you concerned?
I think Trevor.
Well, I'll give you a right response. But are you concerned, Kiborek, that this is a burden on the taxpayer? The last administration managed with 29 CASs. Now we are going for 50. Is it a burden to the taxpayers?
Much as we say it is a burden, the real burden is in the widening of the economy. It is not in ganging yourself, to restricting yourself to certain numbers. It is widening the economy, enabling the economy to thrive. If our economy can thrive, it can sustain even 100. Okay. But for now, what we should be looking is the root cause. The reason why we are all worried and panicking is because of the state of economy, which we are really working, the president is really working to make sure that our economy is stabilized so that we get to be able to accommodate even more Kenyans. There is many more hustlers, more job seekers. I'm sure this position over 20,000 people applied, meaning there's a lot of demand for jobs in this country, either from lower level to the high level. There's a serious demand. That's what our concern should be, not to punish these job seekers. It should be, how do we expand our economy so that we accommodate more people, especially entry level for our graduates and mid-level jobs, so that we get to absorb our own human resource. It is a problem, investing in building this resource, and we end up not absorbing it into the government or into the available economy. So we should be thinking, and the president is thinking, is right ahead on that, thinking on how we can expand this economy so that even Trevor, you can be accommodated. Okay. Because Eddie is talking here. Eddie is talking here. Listen, Trevor, right, tell you, Eddie is talking here and is part of the bloated wage bill. I will have really appreciated Eddie today say, for the interest of Kenyans, from today I'm not delivering a salary, I'm working in Senate pro bono. I will say it's making sense in what he's talking, but he's talking from one side, in the other side is the problem, there's a bloated economy.
Okay, you've been adversely mentioned, so I'll give you a chance to respond.
Yeah, I'm adversely mentioned, and we are young people in Parliament, and Gabriel knows that I respect him so much, and sometimes we have side chats in Parliament. But I think that when you come to national TV, we should not trivialize the matters of this country. Because I think my brother today, I'm surprised, is so unserious with the conversation that we are having here. Because we are talking about a country that people have got serious high cost of living, and we have got serious problems with the economy with regards to every single price of goods and services. We are talking about a country that IMF has indicated that our debt ceilings are beyond imagination. He is member of the National Assembly, and he should be able to know that we just recently reviewed our debt ceiling from 9 trillion to 10 trillion. The impact that this has in our economy is that over 67% of our economy is going to be basically debt. Basically, what that means, and I would want to educate my brother here, is that every single thing that we raise, we have to pay at least 67% of it. We are not even using it in running government or doing anything in the country. That means that only about 33 that is remaining is what is remaining to be shared between the national government and the county governments, and then to be able to pay the government employees, and then be able to do development. He should be concerned with that. And talking about promises, Trevor, by the way, I take a lot of time to study. I don't just speak from, from rumors, okay? The Ruto government, or actually the Ruto regime, has had a lot of promises that have not been kept, and he knows it. Starting with that particular list, Ruto's campaign was based on the fact that he wanted to empower hustlers, and he knows that Ruto went into this country, across this country, and discussed with young people. There are so many clips of Ruto saying, siku gani mtu wa chini atakuwa katika serikali. You know, he said that hustlers will form part of government, and that the class of government was cabinet. Everybody who is in this CAS position are people who have got pension. There are people. Kidero was the former governor of Nairobi. Itumbi has been earning money from government. Is a state-made person. Everybody I can mention here is a politician who has had their chance and earn money from the public coffers. There is no anybody here who is a mamamboga who has been put into this place. So that is the first failed promise. And I can assure you that it talks about things like Kibaki government was bloated, Kibaki government achieved more than Ruto. Let me tell you than Uhuru Kenyatta. Trevor, if Kiborek was to take time to go and study the Kibaki government and Kibaki promises, Kibaki promises were made and delivered within 60 days, because the economy works from putting a substratum and a foundation immediately you get into office. Things like stabilizing prices of goods and services, you need to arrest it immediately, not even more than 30 days. Things like runaway corruption in government, you need to arrest them immediately. Things like core programming around the fundamentals that form the part of the economy, like education, is something you arrest immediately. Kibaki within 60 days had ensured that all our children can be able to enroll for free primary school education. Kibaki within 60 days had been able to stabilize the interest rates in this country to the extent that he put the country into a path to be able to ensure that there is a lot of credit facilities to small and medium businesses. This government here that Kibaki is talking about is asking us to borrow 520 billion in the local market. What Kibaki does not know, that means that the businesses in our economy cannot compete with government in borrowing. In fact, if you look at all our banks today, Trevor, all banks in Kenya today are not in the business of lending. Why? Because it's lucrative to be able to borrow to government. This leads to crowding out of businesses that, again, the Ruto government is saying that it wants to help. So there's a total disarray in the economy. Kibaki government, within 60 days, had reorganized KRA to the extent that there was no leakages and wastage of money in KRA by KRA officials. Kibaki government, within 60 days, had reorganized all the procurement offices that have got bloated bills, right? That he even sent home all procurement officers and came up with a new. So Kibaki government did not succeed on the basis of a bloated government. In fact, it is the Kibaki government that actually proposed that the expense of running a business is too high, that led us to having this constitution to have a leaner government to work. So let's not trivialize these issues, because they are issues of national importance, and most importantly, the issue for some people, it's an issue of life and death. Okay. Kiborek maybe today took breakfast when he was coming here. There are millions of Kenyans. Actually, the statistics that was recently given is that 20% of Kenyans cannot be able to afford a meal a day. That means that we have got about 8 million Kenyans who cannot be able to afford food. Okay. And he's here laughing and talking about trivializing this issue to a matter of...
I'll come to you. Let's hear what Komola has to say. I'll come to you, Kiborek.
You know, I'm just disappointed. About the casualty about how this government is casual about issues.
All right. Komolo.
Trevor, let me help my two younger brothers. It's good you brought me here. Clearly, Eddie and Ruben are close friends. They
read from different scripts,
but tend to agree on many.
Yeah.
But we are talking, I agree, we are talking about very serious issues. And what we need to focus on is how we can solve it going forward. Particularly on this issue of CAS, because we are still on it. I think that because precedent has been set, it's likely that the subsequent presidents will still create it unless we go back to the root cause of the problem, which is how can we cure it in the Constitution. I've listened to Honorable Kiborek refer a lot to Kibaki and previous regimes. Obviously, Kibaki governed before the 2010 Constitution, so it's an entirely new framework. And there's no doubt that a minister can be overwhelmed. I mean, you cannot run, say, the Ministry of Trade, Investments, and whatever, all alone, or internal security. What progressive countries do, because it's obvious that we can't afford this. It's obvious that many people do not have jobs, and it's obvious that the economy is not going to grow, primarily based on the agenda that the current regime is implementing. No economy grows through overtaxation. That's just a fact across the world. Yeah. So what we need to do is what I've always been urging them in private, and now I'll do it publicly. They need both sides of the political divide to come together, have a conversation on minimum reforms that must take place. One of them is returning this thing called CAS to Parliament. There's no reason why Kiborek or Eddie cannot be a deputy minister. There's absolutely no reason, because the linkage here is to have somebody who responds to Parliament, accounts to Parliament on what the executive is doing. And if you're a member of the ruling coalition, then by and large you buy their policies, so you should be able to account to Parliament and be questioned, instead of having these unconstitutional amendments to the standing orders, trying to bring members of the executive to Parliament to answer questions from time to time. It's totally unconstitutional, totally unnecessary, and something that will be cured if the two parties, the two coalitions, so to speak, have a meaningful conversation. Also, you need to understand that in Kenya, we pretend a lot that we want to copy other people, yet we have a different context. So, for example, we pretend that we're a presidential system. Most of it copied from the United States. This is the problem when you have so many politicians who don't involve professionals in some of these things. So we pretend we want to be a presidential system while our body politic is wired to be parliamentary. So it makes sense that since we need to tap in expertise, say we need Trevor who may have expertise in media and related stuff, we create a situation where a certain quarter of members of the executive are drawn from the private sector, or drawn from public sector, not mainstream politics. But you have a significant portion of members of the cabinet who are ministers, who are members of either the Senate or the lower house. They call it here the upper house, but in reality it is the lower house. Either way, you then have a situation where you don't have to spend too much money on many people. After losing election, the next thing you think here, can I make it to the cabinet? Or can I become a CAS or a board member? And you know, my two friends may not know, I've also lost elections. But I've never applied to either be CAS or to be made a board member or to be made, basically these things you run for, immediately you lose elections. The reason is, I believe that once you lose elections, you'll accept.
Exactly.
And there's good life anyway in private sector. Nobody calls me for Arambes and things like that. You know, as you wait, if you want to go back again in the future, well and good. If you want to move on to other things, the world is big enough to accommodate those in government and those outside like Eric Komolo.
Okay. Right.
Let's be progressive.
All right, I have to take a quick break. Kiborek, I know you have the right of response. When we come back, we'll talk about that. Then shift gears and talk about now the protest that is coming up on Monday. There are 7 reasons the Azimio team have lined up for their protest on Monday. We'll try and find out what their solutions are to this. And we'd also like to hear from you. From Citizen TV Kenya, use the hashtag Daybreak. See you in a bit.